Hello there, people of the internet. We're going to go ahead and continue our little series that we have going on the channel right now, and that is stockpiling, well, pros and cons of stockpiling certain kinds of ammunition for any kind of SHTF situation. So, I've already covered the big three. I covered 7.62 by 39, 7.62 by 51, and 5.56. So those are like going to be the big three that people normally go to whenever they want to stockpile for any real practical situation. However, now we're going to start getting into some oddball stuff, but also not that oddball of stuff, because there's plenty of people out there who stockpile this stuff for any kind of SHTF situation, or just basically for practical purposes. So now we are going to move on to the 30-06. Definitely a very common caliber here in the United States. But in terms of use for practicality purposes, it's definitely something that is less popular nowadays than it used to be. The 30-06 is a very large cartridge in comparison to some of our intermediate cartridges, and it doesn't have a whole lot of viable modern style platforms. The best platform, I would say, for the 30-06, if you're going to be using it for any kind of SHTF situation, would be the M1 Garand or Garand, however it is you feel like pronouncing that. However, you want to pay attention to the kinds of 30-06 that you're running through that thing if you are not going to be using any kind of updated gas system. If you are running modern commercial ammunition through that thing, then it will run the rifle harder than the rifle is designed to be ran, and you will eventually bend your operating rod. I will have people down in the comments telling me, no, that's not true. I run plenty of ammunition that is modern production through my M1 Garand, and it runs fine. Well, I have seen literal video footage, as a matter of fact. I'll go ahead and put up some video footage from InRange TV and Forgotten Weapons, who ran an M1 Garand with original M2 ball ammunition, like military spec ammunition, and ran it with commercial ammunition, and you see just how much harder the firearm is ran from this slow motion footage. But the M1 Garand definitely going to be ran much harder with higher pressure ammunition, which is literally what's going to happen. That's just physics, and you will eventually damage the rifle as a result. I have literally seen M1 Garand operating rods get bent from commercial grade ammunition, 150 grain projectiles traveling downrange. A lot of people will assume that the grain of the bullet is what matters. No, it's the pressures that the projectile, well, it's a God, I cannot talk. It's the pressures that the cartridge is firing, not the weight of the projectile itself. Whenever it comes to the actual operating of the firearm, the operation of the firearm from the M1 Garand, it is a gas system, so it is based around the gas pressures that is fired from that cartridge. It has nothing to do with the projectile that is being fired out of the cartridge. As long as you are firing ammunition that is factory made and in spec, then every cartridge for the 30-06 has to follow a certain pressure specification set by SAMI, and if manufacturers go higher or lower than that pressure, then they have to specify on their cartridges. But all that long-winded nonsense out of the way, let's go ahead. Hold on, I think I'm being stung by something. Gotta love Florida, right? Let's go ahead and talk about stockpiling 30-06. If you're going to stockpile 30-06, there's, like I said, there's just not a whole lot of good modern day style firearms out there that really utilize the 30-06. There's a couple out there, HCAR for one example. That's probably going to be your best option if you decide to run with 30-06. Besides that, like I said, the M1 Garand / Garand, however it is you want to pronounce that, that would also probably be your best option. In terms of modern style platforms, I don't think that there's any AR-10s out there chambered in 30-06. I think that the length of the cartridge is simply too long to be ran in an AR-10 platform. If you can get your hands on like a modern day BAR or something like that, then maybe that would help, or like a semi-automatic style closed bolt BAR. The odds of you finding one that is transferable, that's an NFA item, that's 100 years old at this point, probably not something that you would want to enter the end of the world with. This right here is a Sporterized 1917, because my 30-06 ammunition out here is steel case. I could have run the M1 Garand / Garand but I don't want to get yelled at for running steel case ammunition through that rifle. However, I'm actually doing that as a little experiment. We're gonna see what happens whenever I hit 1,000 rounds of steel case 30-06 through that rifle, and we're going to see what kind of damage there is to that system. But 30-06, it's expensive. 30-06 is like over $1 a round right now, unless you're going to get like surplus stuff that's corrosive that you definitely want to make sure that you clean your rifle if you decide to run that ammunition through your rifle, because this surplus stuff that is corrosive, it has salt inside of the primer, and salt on metal will cause metal to rust. So definitely not something that you want to do. If you're going to get modern day commercial ammunition, like I said, it's going to be a little bit on the expensive side. 30-06 ammunition is also significantly longer than, say, 7.62 NATO. As a result, the 30-06 is going to have more weight, it's going to take up more space, you're going to carry less ammunition than if you were to carry an intermediate caliber cartridge, which is one of the main reasons why the United States went from 30-06 to the 223-556, because soldiers could carry more ammunition for the amount of weight and the amount of space. Now 30-06 is an incredibly powerful, incredibly potent round, and you can touch out to some very far distances with 30-06, depending on how good you are, or how good of a shooter you are. If we're talking commercial grade 30-06, it's going to be more powerful than your commercial grade 308 ammunition, simply because the case length is larger. However, if we're talking military spec, the 7.62 NATO and the original M2 ball 30-06, those were designed to kind of, well, the 7.62 NATO was designed to mimic that M2 ball ammunition, so they both send a 150 grain projectile downrange at about 2,800 or so feet per second. Of course, those velocities and grain weights are going to vary slightly depending on manufacturer and depending on time of creation, and there's a lot of variables that go into that. But roughly speaking, 150 grain at around 2,800 feet per second. Of course, that is the military spec loading. Commercial loadings, you can have any like variety of ammunition that you want in 30-06 or in 308. They're like, the sky's the limit whenever it comes to that, simply because there's no specified ammunition type. If you're going to get yourself a 30-06 and stockpile this 30-06, yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter what you want, since this is a 308 diameter bullet, which is incredibly popular here in the United States. If you want soft point, hollow point, tracers, AP rounds, incendiary rounds, if you want regular full metal jackets, if you want solid copper rounds, if you want 100 grain projectiles, if you want 150 grain projectiles, 180 grain, 200 grain, 220 grain, just a tremendous amount of variety out there for any kind of 308 diameter projectile, and the 30-06 is no exception, especially here in the United States. 30-06, it's expensive, it's heavy, but it's powerful, but you're not really going to come across any modern style rifle. It's definitely a antiquated design, simply because it came out over about 120 years ago at this point. It's a long cartridge, it's heavy, it's powerful, it's expensive, you're not going to be able to carry a whole lot of it, and if you do manage to carry like a significant amount of it, what platform are you going to be carrying it with? If you do go with a platform like a BAR or an HCAR or something like that, those would probably be the best options, simply because of ammunition capacity. The M1 Garand, that has an 8-round capacity, 8-round in-block clip, and that's not necessarily something that I would want to enter a modern day firefight with, where everyone around you is going to have like standard capacity 30-round magazines, and they're going to have, you know, 300 plus rounds of ammunition on person, whereas you with your 30-06, you might have 50 rounds or 48 rounds if you're rocking an M1 Garand. And that is going to be not an insignificant amount of weight. Anyone who's ever held one of those M1 Garand bandoliers filled with ammunition knows just how heavy 30-06 can be. As far as I'm concerned, instead of rocking 30-06, I would probably want to rock 7.62 NATO or 308, simply because of the tremendously like how many more options you have for firearms as opposed to the old school 30-06. Now, there's plenty of like old school bolt action rifles and antiquated designs in 30-06. 30-06 is absolutely very, very popular. There's no shortage of rifles championed in 30-06 by any stretch of the imagination. However, modern designed rifles, which is what you would want for a situation where you have to use a rifle to defend yourself and your life and your family's lives and enter an end of the world situation, you would definitely want a modern designed rifle. That being said, this right here should be sending these 150 grain projectiles at around 2,900 feet per second, because this is not mil-spec ammo. Ow! Yep, that 30-06 definitely hits hard. I like this 1917 though. This is a great rifle. Oof! I just sent some 7.62 NATO downrange, and this right here is sending the same bullet a little bit faster, so it does have slightly harsher recoil. So would I recommend 30-06? I mean, you can, but it's not recommended. I would recommend going with 7.62 by 51 as opposed to the 30-06, simply because of the variety of platforms out there chambered in 7.62 NATO, whereas your 30-06, you're very limited on your platforms. The 30-06 is limited for the time period that it has come out and what is available. That's probably the biggest downside with this particular cartridge. Most of the time, if you find yourself a 30-06 rifle, it's going to be either an M1 Garand or an M1 Garand, again, however it is you feel like pronouncing that, or some kind of old school bolt action rifle, simply because whenever it had come out and whenever it was being utilized on a mass scale, that is what was there. That is what it was. And then by the time these modern day rifles and modern day platforms came out, that's whenever 7.62 NATO really began to become way more mainstream. Honestly, if I was going to stockpile 30-06, I would stockpile 30-06 with the idea of using it as a survivalist cartridge as opposed to a combat cartridge. I would have my 223-556 or my 7.62x39 or my 7.62x51 rifle. That is a modern day setup that can, you know, handle the situations that need handled. And then I would have my 30-06 stockpile and my 30-06 rifle like I do right here, right now. That's what I would do, because like in the event that you are out scavenging or doing whatever it is you're doing in the end of the world, and you come across a rifle and it's an old school bolt action hunting rifle, the odds of it being chambered in 30-06 are quite significant, and then you have yourself, you know, ammunition for this rifle that you just found. Whereas if you had, well, I'm going to go ahead and say I would not want to use that old school hunting rifle for anything more than like a survivalist style rifle. I would not stockpile 30-06 with the idea of entering a modern combat situation or an end of the world situation. Anyway, folks, I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share, description below, link to all sorts of stuff. Go check that out. You guys go off, have yourself a fantastic day. I will see you guys on the next episode. Let me know what you guys' thoughts are down below. I imagine that this one's probably going to rustle some jimmies, simply because I cannot recommend it because of the platforms that are available out there and how limited they are. Alright, I'll see you all on the next episode. Since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garand.
shame that bolt action shotguns aren't more mainstream.